The key doesn't work? The officer asked. My mum smiled behind him. She doesn't live here anymore. I was standing on my own porch, grocery bags cutting into my fingers, staring at a lock that had been changed while I was at work, while my parents let my sister move into my house like I'd never existed. Marin didn't even step outside. She leaned against the hallway wall, arms crossed, watching me like I was the intruder. I own this place, I said, but my dad just shook his head like I was confused, like I'd forgotten something important. Then the officer glanced past them. At the brand new lock, the open door, my sister inside, and his expression changed. He turned back to my parents and said, "I'm going to need you to explain something." And suddenly, no one was smiling anymore. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. For a moment, no one said anything. The air felt tight, like even breathing too loud might snap whatever fragile control my parents thought they had over this situation. My mum's smile didn't fully disappear, but it changed, less confident, more measured. "There's nothing to explain," she said, folding her arms like she was settling into a story she'd already rehearsed. She moved out. "We're just taking care of things now. Taking care of things." I let out a short, disbelieving breath. "By locking me out of my own house?" My dad stepped forward slightly, placing himself just enough between me and the door to make a point. "You've been overwhelmed, Seren. You said yourself you needed space." "I said I needed a weekend off," I shot back. "Not that you could just take my house." Behind him, Marin shifted her weight, still inside, still not even pretending to leave. Her fingers brushed along the wall like she was already familiar with every inch of it. That hit harder than anything my parents were saying. This wasn't sudden for them. This was planned. The officer watched all of it without interrupting. His eyes moved from my face to the lock, to the doorframe, to Marin standing inside like she belonged there. Then back to my parents. "Ma'am," he said calmly, "when exactly did she move out?" My mum didn't hesitate this time. "A few months ago." I stared at her. "I was here this morning." That hung there sharp, undeniable. And for the first time, the officer didn't just listen. He frowned slightly, shifted his stance, and looked directly at the lock again before asking a question that made my stomach drop. "Then why does that hardware look like it was installed today?" The officer didn't raise his voice, but something in it changed. Not louder, just firmer. And suddenly, this didn't feel like a family argument anymore. "Everyone step outside," he said, gesturing calmly toward the porch. My mum hesitated. "That's really not necessary." "It is," he replied, cutting her off without aggression, just certainty. That was enough. She stepped out first, heels clicking against the wood. My dad followed, slower, jaw tight. The door stayed open behind them, and Marin stayed inside. She didn't move. Didn't even look like she was planning to. That alone made my chest tighten. The officer noticed too. "Ma'am," he said, glancing past my parents, "I need everyone out here." Marin leaned slightly into the doorway instead, arms still crossed. "I live here," she said flatly. The confidence in her voice didn't match reality, but it wasn't shaky either. It was practiced. I felt it then, that same creeping realization pressing harder. They'd talked about this, planned what to say. "Seren doesn't," my mum added smoothly, like she was filling in a missing piece. "She hasn't for a while." I shook my head immediately. "That's not true. I slept here last night. My stuff is inside. Everything I own is in there." My dad let out a quiet scoff. "Owned," he corrected. That word again. Past tense. Like they were trying to rewrite reality just by saying it enough times. The officer turned to me. "Do you have any ID with this address?" "Yes," I said quickly, shifting the grocery bag to one hand so I could reach into my purse. My fingers fumbled slightly before I pulled out my license and handed it over. He glanced at it briefly, then nodded. But he didn't hand it back right away. Instead, he looked at my parents again. "And you're saying she no longer resides here?" "That's correct," my father said, more firmly now, like he thought this was slipping. "And you changed the locks?" the officer asked. "Yes," my mum answered this time, "for security." "Today?" he asked. A pause. Small, but loud. "Yes," she said. The officer finally handed my ID back, but his attention didn't leave them. "Do you have a receipt from the locksmith?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No," my dad said. "It was handled privately." Privately. That didn't sound right. The officer's eyes narrowed just slightly, not aggressive, just noticing. Processing. He glanced toward the door again, at Marin standing inside like she'd already settled in. Then back at the fresh lock. Then at me. "You said you were here this morning," he said. "Yes." "And nothing was changed?" "Nothing," I said. "It was normal." Silence stretched again, but this time it felt like something was building. Because now it wasn't just my word against theirs. It was details, timing, facts, and something wasn't lining up. The officer took a small step back, scanning the frame of the door more closely, like he was piecing together something none of us had said out loud yet. Then he looked directly at my parents and asked, very clearly, "So why does this look like it was installed within the last few hours?" The question didn't just hang. It cracked something open. And I saw it. For the first time, uncertainty. My mum's composure slipped just a fraction. But it was enough to feel the shift. "We already told you," my dad said quickly, stepping in before she could answer. "We had the locks changed today. That's not a crime." The officer didn't nod. Didn't argue. He just asked, "What time?" That stopped him. "Excuse me?" my dad said. "What time were the locks changed?" the officer repeated, calm and precise. Another pause. Longer this time. This wasn't something they had a ready answer for. "Earlier," my mum said finally. "This afternoon." I felt my grip tighten around the grocery bag. "I left at 8 a.m., I said. "Everything was the same. I got back less than an hour ago." The officer's gaze flicked between us. "So, sometime between 8 a.m. and now?" "Yes," my father said, but his voice had lost that edge of certainty. "And you don't have documentation," the officer added. "It was handled privately," my dad repeated, more defensive now. From inside, Marin let out an annoyed sigh. "Why does any of that even matter? She gave me the house." Everything stopped. Even the air felt like it froze. My head snapped toward her. "What?" Marin stepped closer to the doorway, like she was tired of waiting for them to say it properly. "You weren't using it. You said you were thinking about leaving anyway, so you signed it over." "That's not what I said," I shot back, my voice rising despite myself. "I never signed anything." "You did," she insisted, but now there was something sharper in her tone, defensive, not confident. "You just don't remember." There it was. The same angle my dad had tried. Memory. Like if they leaned on it hard enough, it would become true. The officer stepped slightly between us, not aggressively, just enough to keep things controlled. "Ma'am," he said to Marin, "do you have documentation of that transfer?" "Yes," she said immediately. Too fast. Too certain. "It's inside." "Go get it," he said. She turned without another word and disappeared down the hallway. The second she was out of sight, the silence collapsed into something heavier. I looked at my parents. "What did you do?" My mum didn't answer. Didn't even look at me. My dad exhaled slowly. like he was trying to hold on to control that was already slipping. "You've been overwhelmed, Seren." We stepped in. "That's not stepping in," I said, my voice lower now, steadier. "That's taking over." Neither of them denied it. And that was worse. Footsteps echoed from inside. Maren was coming back, and, suddenly, it didn't matter what they said anymore. Because whatever she was about to hand over was either going to prove everything they'd been claiming, or expose exactly how far they'd gone. She stepped back into view, papers in hand, and the look on her face said she thought she'd already won. Maren didn't hesitate. She walked straight past the threshold and held the papers out like they settled everything. "Here," she said, her voice steady again. "Proof." The officer took them without comment. I watched his face, every small movement, every shift in his eyes as he scanned the page. My name was at the top. Even from a distance, I could see it. My signature at the bottom. Except, my stomach twisted. It looked like mine, but it wasn't. Not exactly. The officer kept reading. Slowly. Carefully. Too carefully for something that was supposed to be simple. Behind him, my mum spoke again, softer now. "You see? It's all been handled." Handled. Like I wasn't even part of it. Like I was already erased. I stepped closer, my voice tight. "That's not my signature." No one responded. Not immediately. Because now, everything hinged on him. The officer didn't look up right away. He flipped the page once, then back again, eyes narrowing slightly as he focused on something near the bottom. A detail. A small one, but it mattered. "You said she signed this over willingly?" he asked, still looking at the document. "Yes," my dad said quickly. "Of course." "And this was notarized?" the officer added. "It's all official," my mum insisted. Finally, he looked up. Not at me. At them. There was no confusion in his expression now. Just quiet certainty. He tapped the bottom corner of the paper with one finger. "Who notarized this?" The question didn't sound dramatic, but it landed like it was. Maren blinked. "It's stamped right there." "I can see that," the officer said. "That's not what I asked." Silence. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it. My mum's posture stiffened, her arms tightening across her chest. Because suddenly, this wasn't about convincing me anymore. It was about convincing him. And that felt different. The officer glanced back down at the document briefly, then returned his gaze to them. "The notary ID listed here," he said slowly, "doesn't match the format used in this state." No one spoke. No one moved. Even Maren's confidence flickered. Just slightly. But it was enough. I felt something shift inside me, not relief, not yet, but clarity. Because now, the story they'd been telling was starting to fall apart. And the officer wasn't done. He straightened slightly, still holding the paper. And his next words came out calm, controlled, and impossible to take back. "I'm going to need all of you to stay right here." Everything slowed after that. Not because nothing was happening, but because every second suddenly mattered. My dad tried to recover first. "This is unnecessary," he said, forcing a steadiness that wasn't there anymore. "It's a signed document." "It's an invalid one," the officer replied, cutting him off cleanly. That word invalid landed harder than anything else so far. My mum shook her head quickly. "There has to be some mistake." "There isn't," he said. Then he turned slightly, angling the paper so all of us could see. "The notary ID is wrong. The formatting is inconsistent. And the signature," he glanced at me briefly, "doesn't appear to match her identification." Silence. Not tense this time. Collapsed. I stepped closer, my eyes locking onto the page. The signature was close, close enough that someone who didn't know me might believe it. But I did. The curve on the last letter was off. The spacing was wrong. It wasn't mine. I never signed this, I said, more firmly now. The officer nodded once, like that confirmed what he already knew. Then he reached for his radio. I'm going to call this in, he said. This may involve document fraud and unlawful entry. That's when everything broke. Marin's confidence vanished first. Wait, no, we were just... She looked at my parents, searching for something to hold on to. You said it would be fine. My dad snapped under the pressure. We were trying to help, he said, but even he didn't sound convinced anymore. By forging a property transfer? I asked. No one answered, because there wasn't a version of this where that sounded reasonable. Within minutes, another police unit arrived. The tone shifted completely after that. What had been a family situation turned into something formal, measured questions, separated conversations, documentation being photographed and collected. Marin was asked to step outside. This time, she didn't argue. She didn't look at me as she walked past, just kept her eyes down, like the reality of where she was standing had finally caught up to her. My parents tried to explain, tried to soften it, but every word just made it clearer. They had taken my access, created a false document, and moved someone into my home without permission. There wasn't a way around that. A legitimate locksmith was called. I stood there as the new lock their lock was removed. Replaced. The door opened again. This time, when I stepped inside, no one stopped me. No one questioned it. Because now, there was no doubt left about who actually lived there. Behind me, I heard my mum say my name once. Quiet. Uncertain. I didn't turn around. Because the distance between us wasn't about the porch anymore. It was everything they'd done to get there. By the end of the night, the fraudulent document was taken as evidence. An investigation was opened. My parents and Marin were formally warned, pending further legal action. But the bigger shift wasn't written down anywhere. Calls stopped. Messages slowed. Then disappeared entirely. And for the first time, the silence didn't feel confusing. It felt accurate. Later that night, I sat alone in my living room. Same couch, same walls, same space. But it didn't feel the same. Not because I lost something, but because I finally understood exactly what had been taken and what had almost been rewritten without me even realizing it. Right before he left, the officer paused at the door and said something I didn't fully process at the time. Ownership isn't just about what people say, it's about what holds up when it's questioned. Now, standing there in the quiet, I understood exactly what he meant. Because when it was questioned, the truth didn't just hold up, it exposed everything.